Human beings are creatures of habit. We tend to get stuck in our ways. And it's no different for English learning. If there are things you're doing which aren't helping you improve, that's a problem. And sometimes we need to be reminded by someone on the outside of the things we're doing which are getting in the way of progress, or maybe the things that we could be doing which might help us improve faster, reach our goals faster. Maybe that is to become a confident English speaker. In this video, I'm going to share the 5 main lifestyle things that I see people doing which limit their progress, which get in the way of achieving your English learning goals, and what you can do about that. Number 1, not prioritizing physical and mental health when it comes to learning. Hopefully we can agree that it's important to eat well and sleep well and exercise to be healthy in general. But we don't as often make the connection to our learning goals. But if you have a serious learning goal, you want to become a good English speaker, a better English speaker, you want to make sure that your body and mind are at their top peak performance, a well-optimized machine. Because what are you doing when you're learning a language? You're remembering new things. You're creating new habits, right, when you're practicing. And there's a lot of input and output going on. You're literally building new pathways in your brain. Well, if your brain is not fully functional, then you're not going to be able to do that as well. I don't need to cite the studies here. It's very well documented that if you don't have enough sleep, if your nutrition is not right, if you're stressed, then you're not going to learn as quickly. It's going to get in the way of your progress. Now, I have been interested in this for a long time, especially when it comes to my mind. It's very important to me to feel sharp. You know that feeling when you're just sharp? Well, it's not always there, right? How can you keep that feeling of just being sharp? Remembering that word when you need it, right? Being able to remember things faster. Feeling clear in your mind, right? I think a big part of this is, of course, sleep and exercise, but a big part of it is diet. And I have seen personally major changes in mental clarity, focus, memory, mood, sleep, and overall well-being after I really started focusing on this, trying to optimize my mind and be as clear as possible, as often as possible. It's possible. And so I was really excited when a company called Magic Mind reached out to me to try their product. So I decided to do their 7-day challenge, 7 days taking their product in a row. And after using it, I noticed big improvements in clarity, in brain fog, a reduction in brain fog, and that feeling of not being able to find exactly the word I need when I need it, which is very important for my job. They have ingredients like, I'll show you, it's this. It isn't actually invisible. It is green. Hold on a second. I can show you what it actually looks like. This is it. It's green. It's a shot. It's pretty cool. It's pretty good. It's pretty cool. You shake it up. You take the shot. It's got lion's mane. It's got vitamin B complex. It's got ashwagandha. It's got a lot of the key nutrients that your brain needs to sleep better, to reduce stress, to improve your brain function. And honestly, it is a great product. And it's cool that you can just take it as a quick shot so you don't have to remember 30 different pills. That's pretty cool. And it's not like coffee. I mean, coffee's different. Coffee's kind of tricking your body into feeling energized for a little while. This is actually giving your brain what it needs to feel relaxed, to feel sharp and clear and reach your full potential. So, if you want to try it out, you can click on the first link in the description and use the code CloudEnglish20, the number 20, CloudEnglish20, and you can get up to 40% off of your first subscription for the next 10 days. So check that out, and thank you to Magic Mind for reaching out. Number 2, a poor learning environment. Your environment matters a lot. If you're living in, let's say you like to live in a neat and organized space, right? But you have roommates and they're always messy. That affects you in a lot of ways. There's a low-level stress going on, right? You feel annoyed, you feel irritated, and so you're less creative, you're less relaxed, and you're less open to new information. Maybe you have a bunch of distractions. People popping in, asking you questions, asking for help, right? Just little things here and there. Maybe you're in a place and you just don't have the right resources, and so whenever I need to look something up, I have to go over there and do that thing, right? You need to think about your environment and build a space for yourself where your learning activity can be effective. I know that sounds obvious, but often we know this and we don't actually do anything about it. Now, I'm not saying go out and build a little shed in the woods. What I'm saying is think about carefully the things that would prevent you from getting what you want to get done. When it comes to English learning, that might be you're sitting down to maybe prepare for an exam you're going to take. You're sitting down to work on maybe interview questions and you want to practice. What are the things that are going to cause you to stop and have to do something? What are the things that are going to prevent you from concentrating on what you need to concentrate on? And make a list of those things. So if it's people coming into the room interrupting you, then you need to make sure you find a little corner and announce to those people that you're going to do something for 40 minutes and that they shouldn't interrupt you for any reason unless the house is burning down. If it's resources, then you need to get a setup. Right? I love setups. My video setup is complicated, but I can just walk into my studio and push a button and boom, I'm ready to go. And because of that, it's a lot easier to make videos. Think about it like that. If you have to go downstairs to get the book that you need or you have to go search something, think about having all of those things as much as possible at your fingertips. So, okay, get ready. Sit down. My pencils are here. My notepad is here. I've got ChatGPT open on this window. I've got my browser open on that window, and then my notes are here as well. Everything's here, and my dictionary is over there just in case. And there's my tea, and there's my sandwich. And the door is closed, and everybody knows I'm doing this thing. And my roommates... Forget about the roommates. Well, you have to sort that out with them, okay? But the point is, you need to pay attention to this, and you need to carve out an environment for yourself that will be conducive to allowing you to get your stuff done. And this is true for language learning, but I think it's true in general, right? To be productive, you have to know to carve out your space, and you have to give yourself permission to actually focus on your environment. Number 3, an imbalanced learning approach. This is extremely important. So what happens is people tend to be on one extreme or another. They like to be very passive, or they like to be extremely intense. And they have trouble. Many people, like 80%, have trouble finding the middle path, the golden mean, as Aristotle might call it. So on one side, I'm just going to listen to podcasts and maybe read some articles. I'm going to change my phone's language to English, and I'll watch movies sometimes. But I'm not going to actually intentionally, actively sit down and learn 10 things a day, 10 words a day, idioms a day, whatever. Focus on grammar, practice pronunciation. I'm not going to do any of that hard, active stuff. I'm just going to allow, through osmosis and through watching movies and maybe listening to podcasts, I'm going to allow it to make me better. Now, to be clear, it is important to have those things as part of your environment. You can immerse yourself in that way. That's very good. But it has to be balanced with active learning time too, with some more intense, intentional learning. To, let's say, build habits, you need to actually work hard to, let's say, make example sentences, to actually study, sit there and study. Yes, like you are in school, study, right? You need to spend time doing that too. And if you don't have both, then you may improve a little bit, but you're not going to build habits. Habits are built by intention and action, right? You have to have a plan and do something. And when you do it and do it a lot, you build muscle memory, better pronunciation, better grammar, better speaking skills. All of that comes through hard work actually doing it. On the other side, there are people who are insanely intense. And the first day they decide, okay, I'm going to get a job in an English-speaking company. I need to have better English skills. So I'm going to be insanely intense, and I'm going to study 7 hours a day and go absolutely crazy practicing and learning. Well, the problem with this is you may have a feeling of overload, where after a week you burn out. And burnout is not good. Burnout means I'm done with this, I can't do it anymore. So if you have to identify your personality type. Are you the person who doesn't really like to do difficult active stuff that feels like school? Or are you more the person who likes to be extremely intense, but then you burn out quickly? If you're either one of those, you need to tell yourself that you are and admit it to yourself, and then swing back a little bit toward the other side and balance it out. It's better to work hard 40 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, than to do it for 1 week and then burn out. So it's better to work hard for a short period of time over a long period of time. And it's good to have that environment and that stuff in the background, that immersion. But if you only have that, you're going to miss out on a lot of important skills and very important habits. So yes, is that like school? Yes, treat it like school. Remember what it's like to be in school and do that, but don't be too intense. Number 4, multitasking during study sessions. Now you might be thinking right now, oh, he's just going to say don't multitask. That is not what I'm going to say. There's actually a great study I read by the Department of Psychology at the University of California about multitasking and how it's not as simple as people think. It depends on the task. This is another point that is very important, where you have to identify for yourself which things you can do when you're multitasking and which things you can't. What that study found is basically for things like listening to a lecture where you can't pause it, learning results went down when people were trying to do that, listen to that, and do other things. People were missing stuff, right? So for some things, it might be great to multitask. I can work with ChatGPT and practice example sentences while I'm chatting with my friends, and my effectiveness isn't decreased. But I can't concentrate on maybe a set of quiz questions I'm working on to take the TOEFL test, I can't prepare for this interview if I'm trying to do three things. I'm practicing interview questions. I'm getting feedback from ChatGPT, but I'm trying to make it feel like a real interview. Well, multitasking maybe not the best thing there. So again, it comes down to knowing yourself and knowing what works. So be very aware of what's working and what's not, and be honest with yourself if something is slowing you down, not allowing you to improve, preventing you from improving, right? If that's happening for one activity, then think about making a change, right? Just be very aware. Okay, for this I can multitask, but for that I cannot. When I'm editing something, if the cuts are very simple, I can multitask. I might even have a TV show on the other screen. But if it's a short project and there are a lot of overlays and things like that, a video, I cannot multitask. I have to focus. I know that about myself, and knowing that about myself allows me to choose how I do the things that I'm going to do, which allows me to be more effective. When can you listen to music while you do stuff, and when can you not? When can you chat with someone and do some work, and when can you not? Right? So it's not a simple answer. It depends on you, and it may be different for different people. You have to learn those things for yourself, identify them, and stick with them as part of your learning plan. Number 5, a lack of immersion. Now, some people think of learning English as a subject in school. Outrageous, ridiculous. It's not. English is a language that you speak with other human beings, and people communicate using this language, share their thoughts, learn about each other, learn things, right? There's a whole culture around it, a culture that's changing over time. It's very dynamic. Well, that's true for every language. But being in school and learning it as a subject in school programs that idea into our brains. English is a subject to learn. But English, the English language, is not like learning biology or chemistry, right? Biology and chemistry, these are specialized fields. We need to know about them. We need to understand them in order to make discoveries in those fields. But that's not the same as the stuff that you need to communicate about anything to other human beings, right? These are very different. The English language is a language, not a subject in school. And so you need to think big picture about it. We often, or many English learners, think of it as this sort of island off in the ocean, right? It's over there, and once a week I row over to the island, I sit there and I learn 10 things, and then I row back, and I'm back in my own comfortable environment. Maybe I'll think about English next week. No. It has to be deeper. It has to be more broad. Now, I said you can't just listen to podcasts and watch movies and that's it. But those things should be part of your environment. That's the value of those things. To surround yourself with it, to immerse yourself, you can listen to podcasts, you can join communities, you can join online book clubs, you can participate in events, local events happening in your city that may be in English, right? There are a lot of those. Check Meetup, check Google, see what's going on, right? See what you can find. Listen to things, read things. And the tip here is to follow your interests. If you're not interested at all, it's easy to give up. But if you're really interested in a particular topic, right? Recently I'm obsessed with this new crazy idea that people are able to see code in a laser. And I don't know if it's real or not, but it's interesting. I can't get enough of it. So I'm reading about people's experiences, and if I were doing that in a language that I wanted to learn, then that language, I would have to learn it really well to understand the thing I'm really interested in right now. So that's the idea, right? To use your interests as a kind of window into the language. Because if you have that window of your interests, you have enthusiasm and passion, you're less likely to give up, right? And it's more likely to become just part of how you think. It's easier to build up an English brain, as I call it. And it's easier to start making friends who also speak English. It's easier to join communities, right? It's never been a better time to build, even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, it's never been a better time to build an environment for yourself that feels like real immersion, that just becomes part of how you think. And it's extremely important to do it. So, and you have to have opportunities to practice. It can't just be input. You have to have opportunities to, yes, learn stuff. You have to have that background, podcasts, movies, books, articles, video games, but also opportunities to speak, opportunities to communicate, collaborate, right? There are many opportunities, and there has to be some output there as well. That is a very important part of immersion, right? When people talk about, oh yeah, you improve when you move to America or the UK or Canada or something, your English gets better because, well, why? Is it just because you're hearing a lot of English? Not really. It's because you have to interact with a lot of people, and sometimes that's a little scary. And so that kind of forces you to build the right habit patterns, which is very important. All right? So to kind of recap, we need to understand ourselves, right? And be honest with ourselves in order to make changes so that we can stop doing things that aren't working and start doing things that will work. We need to build an English learning lifestyle, a real one, so that we can build an English brain. We need to always be assessing, making adjustments. How can I improve what I'm doing? Could I be more effective, more efficient? We need to not give ourselves too much pressure. Stress prevents learning. Not in all cases. The stress of an exam tomorrow encourages learning. Actually, let me clarify this. There is good stress, good pressure, and that can be very motivating. I know I have a thing next week, and so I'm going to study like crazy to make sure that I succeed. That type of pressure is very good. But there is an underlying stress. If you're thinking about problems in your life and they're causing deeper stress as a long-term thing, that can prevent learning, thinking creatively, right? And the sort of mental pathways that you need to create, it's harder to build those when you're always stressed out in general. So just to be clear about that. It's important to keep yourself accountable. You are the only person who's going to say to yourself, hey, I said I would do it. Well then, do it, right? You should be accountable to yourself. And finally, take care of your brain. Take care of your body and your brain. That's going to help you sleep better. That's going to help you focus. That's going to help you feel sharp and crisp all the time. To not feel brain fog, right? So I think it's important to focus on that as well. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Link to the sponsor is in the description, and I will see you in the next one.